today. Today's session for the Chicago Systems Management User Group meeting, we have two topics today. Topic one is top five things to make Windows patching really shine by Arnab Mitra. Arnab is a Microsoft Premier Field Engineer based out of Austin, Texas, and he'll go through real-life scenarios around software updates, why it takes so long, how to deploy it in your environment, and so forth. Topic two is by Simon Binder. Simon will talk about automating Windows servicing using Microsoft solutions and some of the community tools. And he'll go on about within the top of the hour. So to get this going, we're going to have transition this into Arnab. He's got a slide deck up, so hopefully everybody can see a slide called Updates Management. And Arnab will walk you through his presentation and then do a Q&A after. And then we'll have Simon come on to do his piece at the top of the hour. If there's anything else that comes up, please IM window, that should be enabled, and we'll answer those questions as they come along. Thank you, everybody. Arnab, you're on.
Thank you, Jay. I hope you can hear me and see the screen sharing. Could someone confirm?
Yes, we could see it.
Okay, awesome. Great. So this presentation is about updates management. What are the top things that I've seen across the field, some of the issues, best practices I'll be talking about. A quick intro about me. I'm a Premier Field Engineer supporting client management solutions. This includes ConfigMgr, Intune, Windows 10, and the EMS suite. I'm based out of Austin, Texas. I have a blog post where I've, it's not been too long, just been a year, I've started posting content about cloud management, gateways, and some of the cloud solutions with ConfigMgr. I am also on Twitter, and I have shared my email addresses, so if you want to follow up with any questions, you can always contact me. At Microsoft, I have been with more than 10 years now. I started with support, then moved to consulting, and now PFE. So I have seen all areas of issues, like from the field, from support, configuring as a consultant. So I'll share all the best practices and what I've seen across the field. So I'm on slide number 3, configuration. So let's talk about configurations for software updates management. One of the first questions that comes, a lot of people ask is, should we place the software update point remote on a separate server, dedicated box, or is it okay to keep it along with the primary site? So to answer the question, it really depends on the supportability numbers. What are the number of clients that you are going to support? So if you have a client base of, say, less than 25,000, then it's completely okay to have your software update point or the WSUS along with it on the same ConfigMgr primary side. But if you're going to support or plan to support anything more than 25,000, you should always have more than or not have a remote SUP, not have a local SUP rather. You should have a remote SUP. Are there any questions? Okay. Hey, yes, the meeting has started. Probably you want to rejoin the session. For those who cannot see the screen. Okay, so I'll continue. So really the reason for having a remote software update point is based on the supportability numbers. Now, a lot of organizations have placed their SUP on the primary site, as well as they have another SUP on a remote server, thinking that adding another sub have really added your capabilities to support 150,000 clients. However, that's not true, because when you have more than one SUP, then we have like a shared software update point, and you are not really controlling the number of clients through the remote SUP, because there will be clients which will be talking to your primary site, and there will be clients which will be talking to your remote software update point. So get rid of the software update point from your primary site if you plan to support more than 150,000 clients. Next, when we talk about adding more than one software update point, the recommendation is always to share the database. The reason is when you install a new software update point or a new WSUS, it creates a unique update source ID. So what happens is if your primary WSUS or the software update point goes down, the clients will automatically fail over to the next software update point, which is good. That's what you want. However, when they see a new update source ID, they re-download the metadata, the updates, metadata information from the WSUS, or they re-download it. So which can be roughly around 2, 3, 4 gig, depending on the number of products, the number of classifications that you have selected. So if you go with a shared database, same WSUS metadata, because the unique update source ID remains same, and that helps in alleviating or reducing some of the network toll that may occur if you do not share the WSUS database. One common gotcha with this is when people share the WSUS database, they forget to share the content folder. So when you install the WSUS, it tells you where you want to store the updates. You choose usually a local drive, but you have to change that from local drive to a network share, which could be a third server altogether, where both the subs or the WSUS can store the content file. When we talk about ConfigMgr integration, we are not really storing content files. They are actually license files. Some of the updates have a license files. So if you don't have a shared content along with a shared SUS DB, so if a client have moved from one sub to another sub and is trying to download an update, it will fail to download the license file. You will see that from the logs, and maybe re-downloading that update will help you, but it's not going to really clear out that issue, which could again come back with another update. So always plan to share database and plan to share the content files with multiple subs. The next one, with software update point, always schedule a sync. I recently came across an organization, very large organization. They did not have the schedule sync. They were like very change control freaks, where they wanted any change that would happen, they want to know about it. So, which is good. But with ConfigMgr, the supported schedule is the supported sync process is the schedule sync, because there are lots of things integrated with schedule sync. The first reason is when schedule sync happens, it is a full sync. It is not a partial sync that happens when you right-click on your ConfigMgr console and do a sync, which is the manual sync. Whereas when the schedule sync happens, it's a full sync. And when a full sync happens, we also perform certain database maintenance activities along with a full sync, like declining the superseded updates or clearing out the superseded updates, and also cleaning up your expired updates from your deployment groups. So the problem here, if you just keep it manual with them, was with the scheduled, with the manual sync, what they were seeing was their database syncs were inconsistent. So after each sync, there is a version number of the database that you get. So in their hierarchy, they had like the numbers queued up. One was like 116, the other was 118, another was 128. However, in the ConfigMgr console, we were seeing all the numbers were synchronized. So it took a while to really get that issue addressed, that it was really a schedule sync. You will not see a documentation on this that Microsoft does not support a manual sync. We definitely support. However, you should do a schedule sync at least once, like whenever you plan to. So now that company would always perform a schedule sync as like a one-time sync whenever they want, because they want it to be controlled, but they do it in a schedule sync, not like a manual sync. Okay, next, another configuration best practice is configuring the IIS application pools. A lot of times you would see your software update scans are timing out, and this is a pretty easy fix on your IIS WSUS pool. In the application pools, you should increase the queue length to at least 2,000 and the private memory limit to 4 times the RAM, or set it to 0. The best I have seen is keeping it to 0, so that reduces a lot of scan timeouts that happen. The last one is 1,000 updates per deployment. I'm sure you have heard this a lot of times before. It's in multiple best practices, a document. For each software update deployment, do not increase the number of updates to anything more than 1,000. Okay. Moving next. I'm in configuration best practices client settings slide. So with software updates, there are a couple of client settings I'd like to talk about. The first one is the software updates scan cycle. So by default, the software update scan cycle is scheduled for every 7 days, and it is configured for a simple schedule. Now, there might be reasons where you may want to reduce that. Some organizations do like to reduce it to something like every day. So is there a problem with that? No, there's absolutely no problem. In fact, it's good to report the compliance on a custom schedule or a schedule of just 1 day. So if you had been struggling with these compliance issues in ensuring that whether the machines have installed the update, reported they are required or not required after Patch Tuesday, so configuring or changing it from 7 to 1 days is completely all right. However, the catch here is if you go from a simple schedule to a custom schedule, the challenge is, the challenge is if you do a custom schedule, you specify a date and time with it. So if you set it like every day, and there is a date and time by default at the time when you are setting up that schedule, if say that was 3 p.m., all your time machines will start that schedule sync at 3 p.m. There is a randomization of 2 hours, which could be between 2 to 4, you can say. Having said that, it's still not the best configuration because all the traffic, all the WSUS load will come between these 2 hours of that custom schedule. So if you want to keep it for 1 day, keep it on a simple schedule. Don't go for a custom schedule. Now, as we're talking about that software updates scan cycle, does anyone have a schedule more, which is possibly less than 1 day? I hope you guys can chat. So if anyone has less than 1 day, he's paying.
You just I am or
Yeah.
no, nobody should be muted or voice is open if you want to speak up. So Brian is 1 day.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, as long as you're 1 day, you're good. So there used to be times around ConfigMgr 2012 timeframe. Some organizations like this capability, and they were also synchronizing the software updates, say the endpoint protection updates or the Windows Defender updates. So they thought, okay, we should probably be scanning, say, every 4 hours or 8 hours, and that was really causing a lot of issues with the state messages, because each time you perform the software update scan, there is a state message that gets sent, and in a hierarchy that can actually cause a backlog. So now in current branch, we do not allow you to perform a custom schedule, which is anything less than 1 day. So you can obviously set that in the console. You can set it for every 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever you'd like, but we don't honor that from the background. So the minimum scan cycle is actually 24 hours. And as I talk about that minimum scan cycle, there is this minimum 24 hours TTL, which is time to live. Time to live is the value where we honor the updates metadata. So let's say this was very helpful before we introduced that check that if it is anything less than 24 hours, we don't honor. But this TTL value has been there for quite a while. So the reason for this TTL was if you had scheduled things under 30 minutes, then the TTL value used to help in ensuring that instead of contacting the WSUS, we used to wait and just use the metadata that is already there on the client. So you will see in the scan agent log that whether the TTL is expired or TTL is alive or TTL is active or inactive, something like that. So if you are using the right-click tools, then this TTL value gets reset, because if you're forcing a scan, that is like an online scan that happens. So if you use collections and perform a right-click and perform a software update scan cycle, then that value gets reset, and we again connect to the collection to the WSUS software update point for that collection, and then we scan it again. So finally, what I want to say was really don't use custom schedule for a specific time. Just leave it to simple, and 1 day is okay. Don't do anything less than that. The client setting from the GUI may be deceiving. You may see the resultant setting says 15 minutes, 30 minutes, but eventually we are doing 24 hours only. Next, another setting which a lot of people have questions around is the software update deployment re-evaluation cycle. The re-evaluation cycle is the cycle which re-evaluates any updates which have been uninstalled by the end user. So the default schedule is 7 days. Now, do you really need to change that? It depends whether the end user do have the capability of uninstalling an update. So does that mean are they really an admin? So if those people are not really local admins on the box, you really don't need to touch that or change that from 7 days to anything lower. I have seen organizations reduce it to 1 day, but probably that is not needed. And when you perform this deployment reevaluation cycle at less than the 7 days, what we do is we reevaluate each software update. So now you may have thousands of updates and part of, say, multiple deployments. So we reevaluate each update, whether it's applicable. We run a scan cycle, and then for each deployment, we reevaluate whether they are installed or not. So that adds additional processor and CPU usage on the client, and then additional state message back to the management point. So the recommendation is leave it with the default simple schedule, 7 days, if you don't have local admins and you don't expect people to be uninstalling updates. The next one is deadline randomization. So this is another important setting. So it's not a part of the software updates under client settings. It's under the computer agent. So you might miss that. And the default behavior for deadline randomization is whether you want to disable deadline randomization is set to yes. So what the deadline randomization is really talking about is you may, whenever you schedule a deployment, you would have a deadline for a deployment. So say the deadline is for Friday at 3 p.m. for all the machines. So at 3 p.m., all the machines will start deploying the update. So that is going to add a lot of toll on the WSUS because before the installation of an update, there will be scans, and during the installation and after the installation, there will be a lot of network traffic that will happen. So you should always configure the deadline randomization setting to no. Don't disable the deadline randomization, because that will give the software updates another 2 hours of randomization time. So even if it is scheduled for a 3 p.m. deadline, the machines will install a scheduled update between 3 to 5. So that will give some breathing ground for the WSUS servers during these installation. Next one, computer restarts. So this is under client settings, computer restarts, the default notifications. There are two types of notifications, which the first one is temporary notification, which starts at 90-minute interval, which the user can snooze, disable, hit OK, I'll install later. And then we have a permanent notifications, which is at 15-minute when it's left before the deadline. You cannot move the restart countdown timer. You will see a timer going backwards from 15 minutes, which will eventually force restart the machine. What I would recommend is increasing these default notification timers. This is beneficial for a good end user experience. At times, 15 minutes is too less, where someone at the 90-minute interval may have said, okay, remind me later, but after when it is just about 15 minutes, that person may have left the desk and may return back to see all the work is gone. So consider increasing it to a higher interval. If not 60, you may choose another interval setting, depending what suits your organization, but it is definitely helpful for a better end user experience. I'll move to the next slide. Maintenance windows. So I'll talk about the calculation of maintenance windows. Maintenance windows are primarily used for servers. I hope you're not using it for workstations. So a common question around maintenance windows or a misconception is people look at the number of updates that are there, and then if the updates are not installing, they see the updates deployment log and the log for the maintenance coordinator, which says that there is not enough time available to install an update, which is 600. 600 is really the number of seconds which is needed for a single update, which it could be like a regular security update. So you can identify what an update has been configured. So if you go into your ConfigMgr console for each update, if you go to its properties, you will see a maximum runtime. So that maximum runtime will be anywhere around 10, 30, or 60 minutes in the properties. So that 600 seconds you're seeing would be an update which will need a 10-minute time to install the updates. So going back to the maintenance window calculations. So for each update, the initial calculation for maintenance window happens is we look for the restart countdown, which is 15 minutes if a user is logged on. Then we add the maximum runtime for each update, and then we add another 10 minutes for system turnaround time. So if an update is for 10 minutes, with the maximum runtime, we can make it 20, 35 minutes you can expect. So based on it, you can calculate your maintenance windows. Now, the first one is the tricky one, countdown interval. And that was one of the reasons I asked. I hope you're not using it against your computer workstation collection. Do it for servers. Because from my previous slide, I talked about this computer restart permanent notification, 15 minutes. So if you set this to 60 minutes as your computer restart notification, this value changes here from 15 to 60 minutes. So that will add like 60 plus 10 minutes for maximum runtime and another 10 minutes for system restart turnaround time. So, but that's only applicable if you set it for client workstations. So once again, when you set these client settings or maintenance window, do consider this calculation if you're setting maintenance windows on your servers and are also setting up that restart notification pop-up or increasing it from the regular 15 minutes. So roughly you can say 25 minutes you can deduct from each window for just that countdown and the system restart turnaround time with the default settings. Now, what happens with after each update? We recalculate after each update, and if an update which said it needed, say, 30 minutes or 60 minutes, but installed in 10 minutes, let's say, so we again reevaluate so you can install more updates during the maintenance window. So it's very dynamic, and that's where it really doesn't need the amount of time that you can or must calculate with the number of updates that are there multiplied by the amount of time that you have in your maintenance window. Manual, yes, the slide will be available. And as I understand, Jay is recording, so you'll have both. Next, so let's talk about deployments. For deployments, once you have your available deployments that you'd like to deploy, the first thing that you do is you choose between type of deployment, whether you want to go for a required deployment or an available deployment. By default, everybody chooses required deployment. One good use case for available deployment would be if you're deploying feature updates. So Windows 10 18.03 was released in April. So a lot of organizations don't want to force it to people or their end users right away. So if you put it for available, that might help you in somewhat increasing the adoption of the Windows 10 18.03 or in the future release. So you're not forcing people, but anyone who is an IT enthusiast and is interested to adopt the latest Windows 10, they can always choose that as an option. Next, after you have made your choice whether you want to go for available or required, you have to schedule an update. So if you go for available feature updates, you really don't have an option to set up a deadline. So as I said, an example for that is the feature update where you just leave it as is, you're not forcing it, and that's the whole reason you don't get a deadline. However, if you set the deployment setting here to required, then in the scheduling, you still have the option to make a deployment available ahead of time before forcing it for a deployment. So you can either go as soon as possible or specify a specific time. Now, this can get tricky if you look into your deployments in your ConfigMgr console. For all deployments, you will see there is a specific time, is because even though you choose as soon as possible, which is the default setting for required available deployment, we change it to that time when you have actually scheduled that deployment. So don't get concerned. That specific time is actually the time you were creating the deployment. Next, for your deadline, you can choose either as soon as possible or a specific time, like probably end of day on Friday. And that deadline is where we have that 2-hour randomization, which I was talking about in the client setting, disable deadline randomization. Now, in the scheduling, a common mistake that I have seen where an organization may create a deployment, say, at 8 a.m., and then they set it to available at 5 p.m. in the evening, and then they have a deadline for next morning at 9 a.m. So what's the problem with this? The problem here is you're reducing the available time and the deadline to like really too low time, because what you expect at 5 p.m., the end user is really shutting down their PCs, taking their laptop back home, and at 9 a.m. next day, everybody is returning to the office, they plug in their machines, and then it eventually starts running the deployment. The problem here is you're not getting a lot of benefit of the bits bandwidth throttling that can be very valuable. So if you created your deployment at 8 a.m. and you set that same time as available, then the benefit is the end users or machine will have at least 24 hours for the updates to be downloaded in advance. And it's very helpful, especially today, because now we have most of these updates are cumulative in nature, and they're pretty large. So you can expect these 1 gig packages to be downloaded within that 25 hours. And that would be within that bandwidth throttling that you may have. And it would be all background downloading versus this schedule between 5 p.m. and 9 p.m. where the machines are always really turned off, and the next day everybody started downloading the updates from their distribution point. So there is a lot of network traffic happening on Friday morning. All the machines are trying to download the update and then eventually start installing the update. So then there is more traffic or load on the WSUS servers. Go ahead and clean this up. Okay. So a little more on the scheduling on the deadline. So by default, when you create a deployment, you see a deadline time which is 1 week ahead. Some organizations do like to keep it as soon as possible. So it does helps in performing a silent install for the machines. So if we, okay, there's a question by Santiago. Is there a way to improve notification for end user about updates? The pop-up window seems too short for the user to see. Even if you change it, how many times it shows up? So Santiago, I would say that computer restart windows that I just talked about where you can increase the default notifications from 90 to 120 minutes and the forced restart to 60 minutes. That would be the best way to go for the notifications. I'll tell you what Microsoft IT does. At Microsoft IT, they create like a phased approach of deployment. For any deployment, say the Patch Tuesday, they follow a silent, interactive, and mandatory schedule. So in the silent schedule, they do not throw any prompts at all. The only prompt that is available is the restart window that comes up for the end user, and that restart window is that forced 60-minute that just stays on the screen. That's the only notification. Then they move to an interactive approach where they provide more restart pop-ups that 120 minutes and more notifications on the software center. And then there is that force schedule that happens. So maybe a similar approach would possibly help you in talking about in the next tab about the user notifications. Does that answer your question? Great. All right, so going back to our discussion on scheduling, the installation deadline I was talking about, some organizations do like to do as soon as possible. And Microsoft, as I said, great timing, Santiago, for that question. Microsoft IT does that silent install at Patch Tuesday. Although, as I mentioned, as soon as possible deadline does impact the network traffic with the distribution points, all clients trying to download, but then it really helps in achieving their targets for compliance. And when I'll talk about the compliance target, I'll refer back how or when they go for as soon as possible versus a specific time, and what kind of a user notification is helpful. So going back here, next in the deployment tab is the user experiences. For user experiences, there are really three options, whether you want to show all notifications or just notification for restart, or completely hide the software notification. The best option that I've seen most organizations go with, and Microsoft IT does that too as well, is they choose the display in Software Center and only show notifications for computer restarts. So the end user does not see too many notifications that an update is available for deployment and then it has a deadline after 7 days. So that will be too many notifications for the end users. So, and at the same time, if end user is seeing a computer restart window, they want to know why the computer restart is happening. So by displaying in Software Center, when they click on that restart notification, they can actually see it is because there are two updates. The June or July cumulative update got installed, and that is why we are restarting. It's just not restarting for no reason. So the middle option is the best option to go with. Next, under download settings, the last tab for deployment, we have options for the download. So carefully choose these options. By default, we say do not install software updates. If you cannot find it on your distribution point, don't look at neighbor boundary group. But now with the new enhancements with the boundary groups where you can set up neighbors and you can set up time intervals, after how many minutes you want to go and talk to a neighbor boundary group and download the contents. So you can choose that, or whether you would like to go to the default boundary group or don't want to go to the default boundary group at all. So by default, the default side boundary group is set to download, So if that is something you don't want, then always choose do not install software updates. Then there's another important one is download updates from the internet. So what it's really saying is if an update is not available in your distribution points, just go to the internet and download the updates. It sounds very convincing and very great idea that, okay, if the updates are not available, just go to the internet. But carefully choose this option. Microsoft IT does not select this option because they are confident on the boundary groups that are configured. So that is the reason they don't set it up. But in your case, say if you are not very confident that, okay, the AD team has configured the site boundary groups in some way, network is some other way, and it is really a mess. So you really like to see this box checked because it's really helping you in increasing the compliance. If that's the case, don't check it at the time of deployment right away. I would say go ahead, create that deployment, wait for say 2, 3, 5 days as you wait for your deployments, and then once you want to increase your compliance numbers, then go ahead and check this box so the clients can eventually download that update from the internet. The reason is it will help you, say accidentally, let's say you forgot to distribute a software update to a specific site and a distribution point was completely missed out. So in that case, all the clients will start downloading the updates directly from the Microsoft Internet or Microsoft Update. And your networking team will be after you, like what's really happening. Although the neighbor and the default boundary groups are there for your rescue, but if you do not have them configured, because by default, the neighbor boundary group is set to do not install software updates from neighbors. So that could get tricky situation because of human error. It may end up going to the internet and download all the updates. So carefully check that option, maybe probably at a later time. So that's all on the deployment. Next, we'll talk about compliance. So once you do the deployment, the biggest concern is what about the compliance number? The management is never happy about the compliance numbers, right? So they always complain, we want like 100% compliance, and that is really hard to achieve. So if we look about the targets, there could be different kind of targets that you may have. You may have a deployment target for active deployment and a deployment target for critical type of an update versus an active exploit. So based on the type of update, you would probably choose how you want to deploy. And based on this compliance target, if you go back, look at the previous slide where I was talking about whether you want to immediately push the updates or you want to schedule it after 7 days. So if it is an active exploit, you may want to immediately push an update. However, if it is like a cumulative update patch Tuesday, you may want to give users a bit more time, like 7 days as a deadline for the deployment. So that goes back to the target. Now, what about the numbers? That's really the problem. The problem with the compliance calculation is what the admins mostly do is they get the Patch Tuesday updates for a month and they deploy it to a collection, and then they check the compliance against the same collection. And you will never achieve a good compliance rate. Now, a lot of organizations think that Microsoft is doing the Microsoft IT must be doing a great job, like in getting 100% compliance. But what could be numbers? So let me tell you how Microsoft IT measures the compliance, and that is the recommended way for each organization to measure the compliance. You should create a collection of machines, which would be your active machines. So what Microsoft IT does, they have a collection of machines which would be active for the last 14 days, which have sent a heartbeat. So that's a criteria that they are active and they have sent a heartbeat in last 14 days. And against those machines, we get our compliance data. And that really helps in getting results or the actual results, because it's possible there would be a lot of machines which are not active, which are not healthy, and that really screws up the numbers. And you will never see the right results. I can talk like completely another full session just talking about fixing client health. There are tools. There's a client to fix the ConfigMgr client, but at the end of the day, you're not really measuring the compliance the right way if you are not checking the active computers which are really available for your deployment. So creating this collection would really help you in getting the right compliance numbers. So here's an example. Like, this is from my lab. So I have a total of 33 machines, but really the active machines are 7 and inactive 26, obviously because it's a lab. But if I have to look at the compliance reports, my machine, if I run a compliance against the full clients all, that would be way low compared to if I look at the active machines. And just talking about the numbers, Microsoft IT had a compliance number of 88% in the month of April and 92 in the month of May, and that is from the active clients. So it's not like there is something like 100% compliance. So yeah, that's really difficult to achieve. But I hope these measurement of compliance from the active computers would help you in increasing or showing the right compliance results in your organization. Okay. Next, we'll talk about the maintenance of WSUS. That's pretty important to perform a WSUS maintenance. It didn't exist for quite some time. Recently, last 5 years, I've seen the cases have started growing up from support, and now eventually everybody has started talking about. So when we talk about WSUS maintenance, the first question arises, why do I need to go to WSUS when Microsoft says do not touch WSUS console if you have integrated with ConfigMgr? So that is correct. And we also have this checkbox to run the WSUS cleanup wizard after each scheduled scan. So why it is not helpful? So if you are in a hierarchy, this run WSUS cleanup will not work, because for WSUS cleanup, it is expected to have the cleanup bottoms up, like from the lowest WSUS site, and then you start going up to a higher WSUS site. And in between, if a synchronization happens, then from the top to bottom, all the cleanup that you have done of the expired updates, they all return back to your environment. So that is the reason it's not helpful in a hierarchy. However, if you are on a single standalone primary site, this cleanup job is really good. It's all right to run. But do you still need to run the WSUS cleanup maintenance job? Yes, outside of ConfigMgr, you still need to do. The very reason is because the ConfigMgr does not decline the superseded updates. And that is the biggest reason for the scan failed with error with this code 0x80072EE2. Because since those updates are not declined, the superseded updates, and there would be a lot of superseded updates, and since they are not declined, they would just increase the catalog or the metadata or the sheer amount of updates that are available for the clients to scan against. So definitely recommend running the WSUS maintenance. And how you do that, I have this blog post written by Megan. She was part of the support group. She's now in the Docs group, writing the Microsoft Docs articles. But this one is a great article where she have gone really in depth on going through the WSUS maintenance at a high level. It talks about backing up the database, running the server WSUS cleanup wizard, re-indexing the WSUS database, and then declining the superseded updates. That's the PowerShell script that does that. These scripts are also attached to it. It's part of it, so there shouldn't be any problem. It is a very good step-by-step guide. Now you may ask how often you need to run it. Now with the growing number of updates and the cumulative updates, because each month we have these cumulative and the supersedents, I would say run it at least once a month. Schedule it. This article, the blog post, also gives you a step-by-step screenshot how you can schedule it using Task Scheduler, and just don't even worry about doing all of this manually. It may be a daunting task if you have never done this and you have to do it the first time. It may take a while, but then once you do it, once your databases are more healthy after these re-indexing, it will be much more faster in the next cycles. Some of the investments I would recommend on software updates would be going for a cloud management gateway. This is the equivalent of the internet-based client management without exposing your servers on the internet. So really cool technology as we're talking about software updates. The cloud management gateway is really going to help you in increasing those compliance numbers up for the machines which are never on your on-premise network. And the next one is co-management with Intune. So starting Windows 10 1709 or higher, we have introduced the capability to manage or co-manage your Windows 10 device with both ConfigMgr and Intune. So you get best of both worlds. You can use ConfigMgr to deploy your custom applications with all the complexities that you have, and then use Intune to offload some of the capabilities like Windows updates and endpoint protection. Endpoint protection is something like you need to deploy daily and then you need to monitor, and those are exploits that you want to really protect your machines, and then you want to save time and effort in maintaining those deployments and ensuring they are compliant. However, if you just push it or offload it to Intune, as long as they are on the internet, they will be patched from anywhere. It could be Starbucks or just anywhere from their home. And as an admin, you don't have to worry. You can just look at the Intune console and ensure whether they're compliant or not. And when you do these offload for Windows Update and endpoint protection, also sign up for OMS. We have free services for upgrade readiness and updates compliance. So using those, you can get the compliance assessment results, how compliant you are. Express updates is another capability in Windows 10 where you only download the delta of the cumulative update. So each month you have these ever-growing cumulative update of 1 gig in size. So with the Express update, you just download only the delta which is required. There's a video tutorial by Steve Rahi. He have explained in depth on how the whole Express updates work. What I would say is only go for Express updates if you have low, small bandwidth site where you really care about the download. Because when you enable the Express updates, for each update, which is like cumulative update 1 gig in size, you can expect up to like 2 to 5 times the size of download happening on your source as well as on your distribution point. So that will be a lot of traffic. So each update 1 gig, you can think like 3 gig update now you are downloading on your source as well as distributing that 3 gig to distribution point. It's only saving the network traffic between the distribution point to the client. And once it gets downloaded to the client, it re-extracts that 1 gig update. And it could be a little higher than 1 gig. It could be 1 gig and additional 100 megabytes, which is because it unpacks itself and adds those unpacked directories. Once again, the Express updates has been explained very well in this video tutorial, so do refer that. See the pros and cons before implementing it. I'd also recommend going for WSUS on 2016, not just one software update point. All your software update points should be on Server 2016 if you want to take advantage of the capability of managing Surface driver updates. If you're wondering why you need a Server 2016, is because we are bypassing the regular updates channel. We are using a special channel which only WSUS Server 2016 understands to download the Surface drivers, because there are thousands of drivers and we are filtering only the Microsoft channel for software, for Surface drivers. Next, a Power BI dashboard. That's another cool utility to view the updates compliance in a dashboard. There are templates from Microsoft and PowerOn. I have some sample references. You can click on the links and download and evaluate. It's really helpful. I've got like less than 5 minutes. One of the challenges that's been there in the software updates is the cluster aware patching. There is software updates group as a pre-release feature. It's been there for quite a while, but it has not been working successfully for everybody. It works for some, but then a lot of organizations have not seen good results. So product group is working upon it. I also wanted to add the third-party patching, but now in Tech Preview, we have already integrated the HP catalog. So yeah, we have already worked on it. So cluster-aware patching is one area I see still an issue, although people have used smart ways like using Orchestrator or scripts to manually do some of it. But natively from ConfigMgr, it is a challenge. The last slide is about the references. I wanted to share AV exclusion. It's pretty important. It can impact your ConfigMgr environment in various areas, like the management point on the client side. So this blog post is the most recent updated one. Definitely recommend you to follow the guidance. Here's this TechNet gallery for a set of SCCM collections, as I was talking about machines which are active, if you want to get a compliance against that. So yeah, excuse me. So definitely download the PowerShell gallery, which creates like 86 collections. Very helpful. Identify machines like running Windows 10, 1803, 1709. Servers active, offline, so very helpful for day-to-day administration. And then if you want to get more deeper into understanding software updates, Steve Rahi have a couple of videos which goes in depth into software updates. Justin Chalfant, an ex-Microsoft PFE, have also recently shared a deep dive video, and so it's awesome. So definitely recommend that. So 2 minutes left. I'll open the floor for any Q&A. So please unmute yourself or use IM if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Arnab. Thank you, everybody. If there's other questions that come up after the session, just email the Chicago Systems Management User Group directly, and we'll get them off to Arnab as well. And we'll share Arnab's Twitter account so you can direct message him after the fact. Thanks, Arnab, for a great presentation. Really useful information. Appreciate that.
Sure.
And as Arnab said at the beginning, if you joined late, we are recording this, so we'll make the recording and the deck available later today or early tomorrow morning once I gather all the information from the speakers. Now on the next topic is Simon Binder. Simon is Principal Solution Architect at ATIA, and he's going to be talking about automating Windows servicing and using the Microsoft solutions and community tools. Using Intune ConfigMgr, he'll walk through how to create an automated solution for Windows as a service. So Arnab, if you could share your screen on, and you did it already, I appreciate it, and I'll turn it over to you. And I'm sorry, Simon, I'll turn it over to you. And Arnab said he's available through IM as well if you have any other questions. So given that being said, Simon, you're on. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah, wonderful. First of all, thank you for inviting me, and thank you, Arnab, for that great session. Too many notes to go through, I believe. So this session will be about automating Windows servicing using Microsoft solutions and also community tools. So we'll be focusing both on ConfigMgr and Intune, but also in parts on the actual process of Windows as a service and what you will need to think about from an organizational point of view. Please feel free to ask questions, either unmute yourself or in the IM window. I'll be having some time later in the session to answer other questions as well, but please feel free to interrupt. So first of all, I attended a great session at Microsoft Ignite last year where Chris Jackson said we need to have a revolution. And if you haven't seen this session, just go to YouTube for last year's Ignite sessions and search for Chris Jackson. His Twitter handle is @CompatGuy, and he probably has the most interesting and the coolest of all the titles at Microsoft. He's Chief Osmologist. So it's breakout session 2034, Succeed with App Compat for Windows as a Service. And this is really what the session is all about. So the need to revolutionize how we manage not just Windows as a Service and Windows 10, but really client management as a whole. But we'll look at it from a Windows as a Service perspective. And we need to change, and we need to do a quite drastic change, a revolution, so to say. We'll start off by looking at what Windows as a Service is today, how it's changed and what's ahead and what we need to think about. We'll then move into the need for both chaos and order, because at least in the beginning, there will be chaos when we're managing Windows as a Service, but chaos in a good way. And at the end, we will have order. And in the chaos, we always have some kind of order, even though both colleagues of mine, customers of mine, and I'm sure many of you are feeling that, how are we going to manage this? And the simple solution to that is really teamwork. And we'll go into which teams you need to engage more actively now with Windows as a Service than you perhaps have done previously, how we can create teams both by combining technical expertise, but also organizational expertise and people like project managers, IT management people, network engineers, whatever they may be. So these are the three main topics that we'll circulate around. And before that, I will just introduce myself. I'm actually quite impressed by you, Jay, because you are probably the first non-Swedish person that pronounced my name correctly in Swedish. So it's actually Austrian from the beginning, but today my name is Simon Binder, or Binder, which is the Swedish pronunciation of it. I work as a principal solution architect at Atea in Sweden. Atea is a quite interesting organization. We are the second largest IT infrastructure consulting firm in Europe and the 9th largest Microsoft partner in the world, but no one has ever heard about us. But I have a regional responsibility as a lead solution architect. I'm doing work all over Sweden and the Nordics together with my colleagues, and my area of expertise is really client management and mobile device management as a whole, even though I focus primarily on Microsoft technology. But today I'm also focusing quite a lot on the way we can change the workplace. So activity-based workspace, how to not do open office workspace, and how you can achieve good results with that, even though you need to consider what you're doing. I try to speak as much as I can, traveling around Europe especially. My main focus has been Windows as a service, but I do, as I will show you later on, integrate quite a lot around Azure Automation, PowerShell, ConfigMgr, Intune, and other kinds of Microsoft technologies. I'm also quite into public speaking as a whole. I do a bit of coaching. So we had a developer conference here in Sweden a couple of months ago where I was a part of a panel that coached new speakers, and we had a great result from that, which is something I really enjoy and I learned quite a lot from. I'm a Pluralsight author, so I just published my second course in Pluralsight, which is something I really enjoy, working quite close to the Nordic team especially, but that's something I really enjoy and learn a lot from as well. And I'm a Microsoft certified trainer. So starting off with Windows as a service, and it's been quite a journey from the start. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who in the beginning thought that, or some of you may still think that, what's Microsoft doing? How will we ever be able to cope with this? But after a while, I realized that this is a necessary change. It's part of that revolution that we need to have. And it makes a lot of sense. But why is really this something challenging? And we'll start by the non-technical part of why this is challenging for most organizations, I would say. And we'll then move into the technical bits of it. So this is quite a challenge. If I were to ask any one of you to put the next stone on this pyramid, and under no circumstances were you supposed to knock this down, we may probably be quite scared of doing that. And in my opinion, this is how we are measured today, we as IT pros. We are measured reason it's quite hard to be innovative, because that's the opposite of what we are supposed to do in the eyes of the organization that we work for. Not everything should work, but how can we then be innovative? And the next challenge of that is that we have some people that, instead of putting stones on a pyramid that may be a bit unstable, on the other hand, we have people that get measured on how innovative they can be, especially developers, but also other parts of the organization, where the need to be innovative, where the need of building awesome vehicles, awesome business process, awesome products, or creating business value in any other way is the way we move forward, is the way we are measured. And of course, this collides. And that's exactly what Windows as a service is. It's all about being more innovative, being more agile, if you like. But if we are stuck in the old way of measuring us, measuring IT pros, measuring system management professionals on how stable we can be, it will of course be a challenge. And because of that, we need to change the culture, first of all. I'll show you a number of technical ways to improve this, to automate the entire Windows as a service process. But nothing of that will mean anything if you do not change the way you're measured, your culture, the way you view change, the way you view things that happen in your environment. And this may sound a bit boring, but a part of this cultural change is actually empowerment of people like yourselves, like ourselves, people like are managing devices, regardless of them being Windows, Mac, iOS, Android, whatever, managing devices, managing Windows, updating Windows, upgrading Windows, whatever we are doing. So in this need of cultural change, we need a few tools that we really should have received a number of years ago, to be honest. I'll give you a few seconds to read this. I think it's quite enjoyable. This is actually not that uncommon, that yeah, we do most of our development, we do most of our testing in production. And if we're doing that, it's even harder to be innovative. We're supposed to keep the production environment stable. So one of the things that needs to change in combination with the need to change the culture is the ability for us to do our work in a better way, to have a proper test environment, to be empowered to test out scripts, to test out new features, to have a setup which is as similar as possible to a production environment, where you can deploy technical previews of Windows, of Office, of ConfigMgr, whatever you think is necessary, and what's your responsibility. We also need to be on top of the latest technology. So giving you time to stay modern, to stay on top of things, to try out the latest feature instead of what we have done for a couple of years now, to be completely honest, looking at yesterday's technology today, because that's when it's regarded stable. And there are other benefits as well. So we need to have that cultural change in combination with empowering you with new tools that will enable you to be more innovative, that will enable you to be more up to date, and will enable you to create a better, give your business a better benefit from the work you're doing. But that's a part of it. I can talk about this cultural change for ages, but now let's get technical. And I'll start off by showing ConfigMgr and a few features that I feel is highly valuable for us to use to be more modern in the way we're managing feature updates, but also updates. So Arnab has presented the updates part in a great way, and I'll be focusing primarily on the feature update part. Seems like my poor machine just restarted. I'll be showing the latest technical preview of ConfigMgr. And one of the things I highly enjoy with that, and which I was extremely happy to see when they released the feature in itself a couple of previews ago, is the ability to configure phased deployments. And in this preview, they have added a couple of abilities to it. So phased deployment is something that we previously may have configured using scripts, or in most cases, configured it manually. But one of the challenges I receive from my customers, so my customers is asking me, how are we supposed to manage Windows as a service with the same amount of staff that we're having today? And the simple answer to that is automation. And one of the things we can automate with phased deployments is the ability to have an ongoing process where we have technical pilots, we have application pilots, we may have an additional pilot for hardware. I'll get back to this in a couple of minutes. But the thing about it is that we do not have the time with the same amount of staff to manage this manually, to follow up on compliance, follow up on the success rate of a deployment, for example, manually. So when Microsoft introduced phased deployments, that was one of the tools we can use. Sorry about that. To automate the entire process. Here we go. We start off by our upgrade task sequence, and we can have a discussion for ages about what's the proper way to service Windows. Is it task sequences? Is it Windows servicing? Is it Windows Update for Business? Whatever it may be. In my opinion, choose what's most suitable. You will probably find that many of your machines could be managed using servicing or Windows Update for Business, or my favorite, co-managed with Intune managing servicing updates. But some machines will need to have a task sequence to do the in-place upgrade anyways, especially if you have an environment where you have several languages, even though that's been improved quite a lot the last couple of previews and the last couple of builds, both for ConfigMgr and Windows. But you shouldn't be focused on using one single approach to update Windows, rather combining task sequences, Windows Update for Business, Intune, the most suitable tool for a particular group of machines in your environment. But if we look at phase deployments, then we give it the name. And we then have the ability to either automatically create a two-phase deployment, which basically would be a pilot and then a broad deployment. But for us to review the options, we'll go for manual instead. And here we have the ability to create as many phases as we like. So we start by the first phase. So in my case, I usually call that a technical pilot or a technical deployment. This one is usually aimed at IT. It could be aimed towards test machines for your most business critical applications, but this should be a fairly small pilot. This environment is quite empty, so I'll use the collections you shouldn't be using. And we are able to pre-download content, but we'll get back to the content management in a few minutes as well. So the first pilot is really about testing the approach that you're using. So we'll look at a few front ends for users later on. Is the pace good enough? Do you have enough time to download content? Whatever it may be. So because this is the first phase, we can't set a criteria for success of the previous phase, which makes sense. So we can't set the criteria for success. The second thing we are able to do, so conditions for beginning this phase of deployment after success of previous phase. Either you choose to automatically begin the next phase after a deferral period in days. So you can let it deploy, leave it for a while, and then it will automatically move forward. That's the way I would prefer to do it if possible. But we can also say that we want to get back the information that the first phase were successful, but we want to control when the second phase moves forward. And we are also able to gradually make the software available over a period of time. So if you do not want every single device to start downloading and start installing this particular feature upgrade instantly in this particular deployment group, we can divide that over a period of days. And as Arnab also mentioned, we can make this required, but I usually prefer to have it available for a couple of days. And the reason for that is to really content management, first of all, which we will get back to. But the second thing that's important to remember is that this is actually about user experience. If we enable users to be empowered so that they can choose when to install a feature upgrade, they will view it as a better alternative than getting it pushed down to them. And this is also a cultural change for many organizations where users are used to IT pushing out content, pushing out updates or whatever it may be, and they install it as soon as possible. But that may not be at the appropriate time for a particular person. So if you are able to put it out as available for a couple of days or a couple of weeks or a couple of months, depending on where in the life cycle of a particular Windows feature upgrade you are. So we leave it at that. And after that, we have basically the same kind of experience in this deployment wizard as we have with a regular deployment. So we now have our technical pilot. The second pilot, which I usually set up, is the application pilot. And if we review the recommended sizes of each pilot, a technical pilot, and remember that I'm from Sweden, so a large organization in Sweden would probably be around 10,000 seats. Feel free to laugh, but that's what I'm using. That's how it looks. So in a 10,000 seat environment, I would recommend that the technical pilot, which was the first one we set up, would be around, say, 100 devices or less, depending on the complexity of the environment. The application pilot for an environment of any size, but looking at a 10,000 seat environment, should be around 10 to 15% of the total environment. And that's based on that's the amount of machines you probably will need to gather to get one machine with every single application that you are managing, of every single hardware model, of every geographical location of your organization, every network segment, and preferably even every OU where you have devices. So that's really to cover all your bases, ensuring that this, which is the main pilot, covers your entire estate, so that you are prepared to what will possibly hit you when you go to a broader deployment. And as you can see now, the first option has lightened up. So what's the criteria for success of the previous phase? So how many percentage of that deployment should be successful? 1 would be a really bad number, I would say. But looking at it, you should expect somewhere around 90%. That will be dependent on what you're doing apart from doing the actual feature upgrade. You can be deploying drivers, you can be deploying firmware, new applications, whatever, and that will probably lower the success rate a bit. So for the technical pilot, I probably would recommend you to have a lower success percentage and then start the next phase manually. And for the rest of the rings later on, you could probably have that automated, but I'll get back to that as well. So let's set it up as well. And then you keep on building your rings, and I'll get back to that when we move into Intune instead. And in this way, you're able to have control, but still have a bit of automation. I'll show you a couple of scripts later on for how you can add devices or users, for the matter, to your collections to really build this technical pilot, application pilot, and then the following rings. But I'll get deeper into that in a couple of minutes. But one recommendation, and something that I bump into quite often, is that you shouldn't be configuring too many deployment rings. It will only add to your management load. Instead, have a few rings in an environment which I configured for Windows as a Service a couple of weeks ago, which had about 11,000 seats. We are using 3 deployment rings. So technical pilot, application pilot, and then ring 1, 2, 3. That's all we use. And we then instead work with deferral based on the next solution I'll show you. We summarize the space deployment, and we can then find it where we find the regular deployments. And if I right-click that, you'll see that I have a couple of options. So move to the next phase, resume, and suspend. So as we'll see in Intune later on, we are also able to suspend or pause a specific phase deployment if needed, if we get a critical error or a critical issue somewhere. But that's really useful. I'm looking forward to some additional features that I hope will be coming to this, but it's something I really enjoy seeing, and in combination with, let's see where we have that one. In combination with upgrade readiness, or really Windows Analytics as a whole, we are able today to build an almost fully automated solution for Windows as a service. If you aren't using Windows Analytics today, you really should be looking into it. Sorry, that's the correct one. It consists of 3 different solutions. So we have upgrade readiness, which is used to move either from Windows 7 or Windows 8.1 to Windows 10, or between feature upgrades. We have update compliance, which is a great way to keep your devices, regardless if they are managed by Intune, if they're managed by vanilla, WSUS, ConfigMgr, whichever solution you'll use. You can get a common solution to view your compliance from an update perspective in that. And you also have device health, which can give you a lot of useful information on app crashes, driver crashes, and other parts. In regards to the cost of this, upgrade readiness and upgrade compliance, update compliance, they are completely free. You can use them as much as you like. When it comes to device health, that requires you to have a Windows Enterprise license on your machines. But other than that, you're free to use it. But to really drive Windows as a service, you need telemetry. And some of your organizations may have questions about that. It's rather well documented, to be honest, on what kind of information the telemetry of Windows 10 is sending to Microsoft. And you're now more able than ever to view exactly what's sent by using the tools that are now integrated as part of Windows 18.03. But what this really is, it's a way to get data, the combined data of telemetry, apply it to your environment, and use this solution as a way to drive your Windows as a service process and create collections based on it. So we'll head over here. So it's quite easy to enable this, especially on Windows 10. It's basically about deploying a private key to your OMS workspace, which will then point your telemetry data to this particular solution, and you will get information based on your estate of machines. So what it will do is that it will inventory all your applications, all your drivers, and prioritize them for you so you know which applications to focus on. This data in this particular tenant is a demo tenant. So it's, as we can see over here, 6,000 machines. And on 6,000 machines, it found 30,000 applications. And that may sound high, but taking into account that these 30,000 applications is really every single version of an app, every single update, every single driver, that's something you probably could count on getting a quite high number there. But the thing you need to focus on is the second one, so the 622 we see here. That's applications in need of review. They are decided depending on the number of installations. So if an application is installed on more than 2% of your total estate, they will be put into not reviewed, and it's up to you to review them and either acknowledge that, yeah, we have total control over this particular application or driver, just put it as good to go, or, oh, I didn't know I had this application, or as we'll see over here, we, in this case, have 55 applications with known issues that has been identified by Microsoft or an ISV or a customer in need of review. So this is usually where we start. So we have a number of applications. We have a number of applications with fixes available, which we can look deeper into. So we work with applications, we work with drivers. We can move into them with the fixes available. So it's Checkpoint and Microsoft Network Monitor. And as we can see, these applications will need a reinstallation afterwards. So that's something we, for example, could add to a task sequence, for example, that this particular version of Checkpoint needs some extra love and care, and we need to review it and reinstall it afterwards. So that's a way for you to get an inventory, an up-to-date inventory, get some insight in which of your applications will be taking a bit of extra time for you to manage. And you can then, when you have a fix for this done, you can approve it, say, yeah, devices with this particular application would be able to install. And that's where the real cool integration with ConfigMgr kicks in. So when we move through this process, we'll then get to the computers that are eligible to receive a new feature upgrade. And this information is then integrated into ConfigMgr. It's a kind of basic setup process where you allow OMS to talk to your ConfigMgr site server. It will then, I believe it's once a day now, fetch information from this solution, and you can use that information to create your collections, which I may not have set up in this environment. So you're able to, based on the data in upgrade readiness, create collections in your ConfigMgr environment, which you then can integrate with your phase deployments, so that you only have computers in your first ring, your second ring, or your third ring, which you are actually able to upgrade without any problems as far as applications or drivers considered. So that's something I highly encourage you to do. You will run into a bit of a challenge, especially if you are short of time in your deployment. The customer I just helped out with this realized 4 months prior to 1607 being out of support that they had 6,000 machines left on that. In that particular case, the timing which you get in upgrade readiness or in the entire Windows Analytics solution today, which is up to 72 hours to get the initial information, but then you have about 24 hours. I've seen more than 24 hours for it to refresh when you have done changes to it as well. And that could be a challenge if you are trying to force out a particular feature upgrade. So ensure that you have enough time. Microsoft are working on getting that timing down, but you need to take that into consideration. If you want to do something tomorrow or today, and you base your collections on the data from Windows Analytics, take that into consideration and be aware of that it may take some additional time for it to reflect in your collections. So if you need to do something now or tomorrow, I would suggest that you, instead of limiting your collection to an upgrade readiness collection, limit it to something else. So you have an emergency collection, for example. So 2 last things to look into. Like I said, everything when it comes to Windows as a Service is really about user experience. And there are a bunch of great community tools out there, which is free for you to use. I'm quickly going to show you 2 of them. So first of all, the solution I've used the most. So a guy called Rich Maudsley from the UK have created this front end for Windows 10 upgrades, which is run outside of a task sequence, which in my opinion is a good way to do it. The reason for that being that you do not want to see task sequences fail just because pre-checks failed. It would be better to have the entire process stopped before starting the task sequence. So you get this wizard, or the user gets this wizard. You are fully able to brand it with your organization's colors, logos, whatever you like. The user then moves forward and is presented with a number of checks. And you're able to view hard drive space, available RAM, if it's connected using cable or battery, and if it's charged enough to do the feature upgrade. You can actually defer models if you like to. So in my particular case, it's not configured to run in a VM. And you have a number of additional checks for Wi-Fi, cable networks, and so on. So that you know that when this is actually done, when it's done all its quick checks, you have a higher possibility for the task sequence itself to actually be successful. And you can, of course, configure all these checks as you like to suit your needs, to suit your environment. But it's really easy to get started with, and I really enjoy the user experience and the look and feel of this. The second tool I'll show, some of you may have seen previously, is one of OneWin's tools. So Jörgen Nilsson and Johan Sjöbelius. It's almost the same. You get the same kind of features. You get a number of pre-checks, which you can configure freely as well. But the main thing that I like about this particular solution is the ability to schedule your installation. So you can enable the user to either upgrade now or schedule the installation at a later time. And you even get these two choices. So you're able to set a date and a time for when this particular machine will be upgraded. You as a user can either choose to manually start the upgrade, so you'll get prompted with the exact same window again, or you can choose to start it automatically at any point, any day or any time. That would be suitable if you wanted to do the feature upgrade when you're off work, on a weekend, whatever you may choose. But the manual one gives the user a bit more control over this as well. So again, this is completely free to use. It's updated regularly, both of these solutions. And I highly encourage you to look into similar solutions like this so you get the better user experience, especially when it comes to Config Manager. Most of these solutions are aimed at Config Manager, but we are getting more and more support for Intune solutions as well. But I highly encourage you to look into either Reach Mosley's one or this one from OneWin. And there is also a number of additional free tools from the community out there for you to really enhance your user experience with. And most of them you are able to brand with your organization's logos and colors, whatever you like, to get a good user experience. And so the user knows that this pop-up, this window, which may be completely new to them, is actually something that you have sent out to them. That's that. So moving on to Intune, which is something I highly encourage you to do. I really enjoy that Arnab was showing the benefit of using Intune in co-management to drive your software updates, but it can also help you drive Windows 10 update rings. So in my particular environment, as you can see now, I haven't updated this for a while, so I have 79 rings available, but we'll soon add some additional rings to this. I'll first show you how to create a ring manually. So again, technical pilot. And the different options you can configure. So you can now choose both semi-annual channel targeted and semi-annual channel, which is really something that we are moving away from. It's up to you to decide when you deploy a particular feature upgrade. Microsoft can only leave a recommendation, but you really should be ignoring the talks about targeted and so on. You deploy it when you feel it's ready for your environment. And we're also able to configure Windows Insider previews in this solution as well. We can then choose to also include product updates for other Microsoft products and also Windows drivers. We configure update behavior, so when active hours start and finish. This is something that my customers in education especially enjoy, that we are able to defer updates and upgrades from happening during lesson hours. We can do a number of restart checks to ensure that this device, when it gets upgraded, need to have a certain amount of battery or being connected with cable and so on. What we then really are working with to drive this automation is deferral periods. So in this particular case, we have chosen semi-annual channel targeted, which basically is the first day when a particular version of Windows 10 is available. We then choose how many days we want to defer quality updates or feature updates. So from the time of release to the day when you want to start your servicing or your updates, that's what we configure here. And we're also able to configure delivery optimization mode, which is something I also, again, encourage you to look into, because you will probably need some kind of content management technique, either using express updates, peer cache, branch cache. You can be using Nomad from Warney, Stifler from 2Pint, OneSite from Adaptiva, but you will probably need some kind of content management solution. And that's one of the parts with teamwork you need to consider. Regardless of which of the content management solutions you use, you need to have a really good communication with your networking team. The customer I've been referring to, they had a huge challenge with their Wi-Fi network. Like I said, 11,000 seats, but they had 1,000 locations. And every single of these locations had Wi-Fi, but on one single subnet, which made it quite impossible to do any kind of more advanced content management on Wi-Fi for them, which was a challenge. So that's something they are now reconfiguring and redesigning together with their networking team to enable a more efficient deployment of content. We do not have the same kind of advanced options with Intune as we have with ConfigMgr, but that's also a bit of the point with it. Like, keep it simple and with as much automation as possible. And parts of that comes from the ability to use the Graph API together with Intune to really put some additional automation on top of Intune, which we haven't been able to do previously. So this particular script I'm showing now, it's actually I just finalized it to have it done before tonight. So this is one of the scripts. I've previously created a number of scripts to automate Windows as a service for Intune, but that was based on basically Azure AD and Azure AD groups. So I'm now reworking most of these scripts to use the Graph API instead, which again will drive automation even further. So currently I'm using 3 different scripts to automate Windows as a service with Intune. I have this one, which I'll soon show for you, which creates device configuration policies, the exact same policies as I just showed you. It will assign them to Azure AD groups, and it will also create the Azure AD groups needed for it if you like to. And you can, of course, also use this in combination. So with synced groups, you can adopt this script to use with ConfigMgr and AD groups. The logic is basically the same. When this is up and running, I've configured a number of JSON configurations for this. so that you have a constant flow of installations. So again, you see that I have technical compatibility, first ring, second ring. So it's the same logic. So it will actually move ahead in time. And the only thing I'll be doing as an administrator in this solution, by using the second script, which is the second one I'll rework now. This script is actually entered into Azure Automation, and it runs once every hour. The usage of this is that it looks into a particular Azure AD group, which I've enabled for self-service membership for my entire environment. So any user can add themselves to this particular group. This script will then look at all their devices, check to see which of these devices are Windows 10 based, and add those devices to a particular Azure AD group, which will then be deferred from these upgrade rings, which is configured. So in this way, I enable both myself as an administrator, but also the users to have a self-service approach to Microsoft Intune and Windows as a Service, so they can decide when they want to get a specific feature upgrade. And the only thing I need to manage is memberships of one particular Azure AD group. Everything else will be automated. If they remove themselves from that group, their devices will be removed from the deferral group, and they'll move back into the exact same policies and AD groups as they were before. So let's run this. And all of these functions are available on GitHub, so you can use them for your own scripts. And I'll publish this script on my blog in a few days, hopefully. You can get the old ones there ready. So now we have enabled the functions. Run the script. And this is, of course, you're able to automate the credentials if you'd like to. You shouldn't be using your tenant admin. Again, sorry for that. Obviously, I can't type. So what this script will do is that it will, first of all, add a specific Windows version. So in this case, 1809, or your preferred version. It will then create a number of variables for your different groups, counter groups. In JSON configuration, I've pre-configured the different JSON configurations for each particular ring. So the configuration of each deployment ring, which you can configure in detail. It will then check all these JSON files, create a policy based on each and every one of them. It will check if it already exists. It will then do the same for your Azure AD groups, and it will then assign each particular configuration to each particular group. And there you have your rings set up, your Azure AD group setup, and you then move on to populate these using a third script. And all of these three can be automated. So when a new version is released, you kick off the first script, you populate it, and you enable the self-service script to defer your devices. And there you go. You have a full solution to manage Windows as a service with Intune as well. And that's something I highly encourage you to do. It's an easy way to do it, but in some cases, it may not be appropriate for your particular environment to do so. And there are many reasons for it. You may want to manage applications in a more advanced way than we can do with Intune today. You may want to create a better user experience where a user can schedule the installation, or you don't use Intune as your MDM for the matter. So why is this important? And the reason is quite easy. You need to do this, not only when it comes to Windows as a service, but really when it comes to Office 365, when it comes to ConfigMgr, Windows Server, and so on. We are seeing a much more rapid approach to how versions are released. And the reason for it is fairly simple. First of all, it's security. With this more rapid deployment cycle or release cycle from Microsoft, we're able to stay more secure if we keep up to date. Also, innovation. We are now able to get new features in a much higher pace than before. And all of this will actually also drive some other really vital part of your IT organization or your IT infrastructure. So one of the challenges is, of course, your applications. That's the main challenge with Windows as a service. It's the main challenge with Windows Server as a service and as well. You need to modernize that. It's vital. And this is a way to drive it. And for some organizations, it's really, really hard. I totally get that. But that's something we need to do to move forward. So innovation and security especially. So before I summarize, do we have any questions? And feel free to reach out to me afterwards if you have any questions on this topic or Windows as a service as a whole. You will find my contact details in a few slides. So looking at Windows as a service and the automation of it, it's not hard, but it is challenging. So it's not hard from a technical point of view. We have all the technical possibilities that we would ever need to do this in a really efficient way, in a way that's user-friendly, where we can manage content in a good way. We do not need to invest a huge amount of money in specialized solutions if you don't want to. You have all the tools you need. The challenge is really about changing the culture, and that may be hard, but it's something that will benefit your entire organization to do so. It's user-centric. That's what it's all about. We as IT pros, we are there to help our users, to help our colleagues, to help our organization to be more productive. This is a way to drive productivity in the organization. Some may argue that, yeah, but this is taking a user offline for a certain amount of hours. Yes, that's absolutely true. Every organization all organizations aren't able to do this on weekends, on evenings, on school holidays, or whatever it may be. But most organizations are able to find time for every single user where they're able to do this without disturbing them. And we're also giving them new tools to be even more productive. And that's something that's vital for us to remember as well. When we review every single feature update of Windows, which new features can be used by a small part or a large part of our organization to make our users more productive. And that's what we are supposed to sell internally. So reviewing that, yeah, you get security, you get performance, but you also get these new features that can help this particular department, this particular group of people to be more productive. May it be virtual desktops, it can be timeline, it can be eye tracking even, but find the business need for it. I'm the first to admit that I love cool technical features, but I can't sell eye tracking only because it's cool. I need to find something that enables one or more users, the more the better, to be more productive with this particular feature. And if we put that first in mind, to create a more productive workplace, to create a more secure workspace, and at any time when we're designing a Windows as a Service solution, puts the user first and foremost. At that point, we'll be much more successful, and it will be a good thing, not just a challenge. And as I see it, this is absolutely vital for our future careers. The ability to be more agile, to keep up to date, to have this user-centric approach, to be focusing on the business benefit, the business need, rather than the technology in itself, to always have a business case for anything we do and be able to drive automation, to drive productivity, to drive great user experience, and to be able to understand the organizations where you're working in, the business needs, the business goals of each solution, each organization. That's absolutely vital if we are to keep working in IT. Regardless if you are an in-house technician, if you're a consultant, if you're a partner, if you're Microsoft, we need to have the business goals first in mind, together with the user-centric approach. So I really appreciate you taking your time. It's been great. I'm really grateful for the invitation. And I hope this has inspired you to go out and automate Windows as a Service, that you will see it as an enabler, not a huge obstacle on the road. And if you have any questions in regards to changing the culture, other tools that you can use, questions about the technology, scripts, and so on, please feel free to reach out, either on my blog, Twitter, my podcast, or which way is more suitable to you, or through the user group itself. So thank you a lot. I hope you enjoy the rest of the day, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Simon. Really appreciate the presentation. We got a couple of minutes. Anybody else has questions for Simon or Arnab? They're both on the line, either through IM or just unmute yourself and speak up. All right, looks like no questions. So we're going to end the presentation and the recording will stop shortly. I will make this presentation, the slide decks, available as soon as I get it from the presenters. And this will be uploaded to YouTube, and along with the follow-up email will be sent to all those who signed up for this event with the YouTube link, as well as a link to download the slides. Thank you for your time, and look out for the on-site meeting for September 17th in Chicago. Email invitation coming up in the next couple of weeks. Looking forward to seeing all of you again, and we'll do another online shortly as well. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.